And I think what I would just say next is it's good to welcome Pam to us as our first speaker that's present. And if she'd like to come forward, she will talk about the vast range of activities that she's essentially undertaken in all those years of the work for the Wandsworth Historical Society. So Pam, over to you. Please come.
Okay.
And please talk into that, otherwise you'll get into trouble like I do.
Yeah,
okay?
yeah, I've been lectured about it already. Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, what I'm going to talk about goes actually before my time. I joined Wandsworth Historical Society when I was 15, and they had already started on the Foreshore and started excavations. So I have cheekily changed the title to add a plus to it, because the actual start date I do not yet know, but it must be in the late 50s or 60s, early 60s. And if anyone's good at women's fashion, you might be able to help me there. This is one of our finds of a lifetime. It was a Middle Iron Age sword, 400/350 to 250 BC, retrieved from near the mouth of the Wandle. And I think on the same day, because I wasn't there, in 1971, they found a Saxon sea axe. And that nearly went back in the Thames because someone thought it was a bread knife. My policy's always been to pick it up and look at it carefully afterwards. Right, this is the area that we cover most intensively. We've done various bits of the Wandsworth Foreshore, that's the borough, over the years. Some have not been very productive, some have been frankly dangerous. So these are two photos I took in 2005 from the top floor of the ICL building, which was for sale as luxury flats. And I can tell you everyone up there with a camera was never going to buy a luxury flat. So on the left is an area where we have intensively researched and where there isn't something like boat slipways and stuff that's covering the foreshore. And if you look, there's the District Line Railway Bridge, and just by the first pillar is a long strip of gravel ridge. That is one of the most important areas for material we've been finding, and it'll occur in lots of pictures. We also have recorded in that time, one way and another, the changes to the area around the foreshore as well as the foreshore. So in this picture, you can see the remains of buildings that have been demolished. In the next set, you can see what was there before. So we have got a snapshot for all that time of the demolitions and changing. And this area here at the bottom is now a rather smart piazza with chic bars and carluccios. The other side, from Putney Bridge at the bottom, has a lot of damage. And then there's the old riverboat jetty, which has been superseded by the clippers. And we go right up to the Beverley Brook, which is on the left of the foreshore, a little bit beyond the last of those boats. And then it's the London Borough of Richmond. We have gone on the other side and we have recorded features there in the past. And on the right, those lights on the right are Fulham Football Ground, to give you some sort of idea of the distance. So that's it in 2005. And then the top, these ones are 1976. And you can see the buildings and industrial stuff that was there before. The whole area just there was industrial. Now it is all bars and restaurants and luxury flats. Over here has changed less, but now if you looked in that direction, now you would see houses. So it is just a good way of looking back over quite a long time. And I think it's probably a wonderful archive to go through. Now, this is the earliest image of an independent Wandsworth Historical Society Mudlark and Foreshore survey. I know that they went out with the Thames Basin Archaeological Observers Group before that. So sometime in the late 50s or early 60s, people were honing their skills on foreshore recording with that group under Siloria. And I appeal to the audience, if anybody can recognize the people in that photograph. There is, I'll walk over there. I'm going to point to Nick Fuentes and Brian Blois, and they're the only two people I recognize. Anyone else, please help if you know. I don't recognize any of the others from my digging career. And I started in 1966. They found Roman on the Putney Reach and not on the other areas they looked at. So they clearly, according to the local paper, looked at Fulham and the Wandle area as well. But I have found no record yet in paperwork about what they found, though last Sunday I went through stuff that must have come from the Society Secretary of the time and found all sorts of extra information. So people had letters and records at home, and they're gradually coming back. And so we may find out. Now, it's clear that they were down at Battersea, and the black and white photograph on the left looks like perhaps the Thames Basin Observers Group and WHS together. Our secretary then is on the far left of the photo, and we're not using our standard equipment because it's a metal bucket. So it's before the digging started. So again, if anybody recognizes anybody or can give me a better idea of the dating of the women's clothing, I'd be grateful. Then the next two photographs have got documentary evidence, and in fact, the person with the green shirt, second from the left, is actually me as a teenager. So I know the date and I know all about it. And they did some investigations at Battersea, found a load of what appears to be dumped material, and by that stage had the distinctive tools in the Wandsworth Historical Society colours, which are red and yellow, so that you could find the tools on a site. And this is the area that we have focused on we're now in the 55th year. And in 1971, in the spring, they found the series of timber posts which are part of a fish trap. And these are the first days of planning the fish trap in. And we're in safer ground there because I know who a lot of the people are and I have the paperwork. And I was there sometimes. But that is something that we look at all the time whenever the tide is low enough. And so there is an incredibly long record of its condition and the erosion around it. And just as an example, a check in spring 2009, Mike Webber of the Thames Archaeological Survey kindly took two samples, one each from two different timbers, and came up with one being oak and one being elm, and a radiocarbon date range of about AD 410 to 640, which covers the end of the Roman period and the beginning of the early medieval. And interestingly, not far from there was a large late Roman coin hoard found, where the coins are predominantly 380s to 402, and Jenny will know all about those because she wrote them up. And then we had another chance of a lifetime. We had a drought and low tides, and 5 days of low tides in 1995. And we managed to plan as much as possible, and probably not all of it, 32 meters of this fish trap, which seems to have 2 rows of posts. We don't know whether it's 2 different stages or part of the structure. And the method for planning right out in the river was to send somebody out, and this is Nick Fuentes, on the shallow bit, with waders and a ranging rod and one end of a tape. And then we triangulated in all the posts, and we ended up with that plan. We've not had such a good opportunity since. And this is just an example of the series of photographs of what it was like in 1973, 2005, and 2011. And please note how the gravel is disappearing. There is fantastic erosion all along this stretch that starts wildly in 2005 when the riverboats start, and has gone completely crazy now with the extra Uber buses, the more of them, and a service that is pretty regular now. But I'll show you the damage later on. But you can see that the gravel protecting the deposits is being washed away as well, so they're not going to survive that well. And then we daringly, in 1995, also did a little sondage to see what was going on lower down the posts, and found this wattling, which is either a hurdle or a barrier or something to walk on. Recorded it, filled it in most carefully, and please note how far down in the foreshore it is, because this is part of the tragedy that's going on. It doesn't exist anymore. And then it came up on the surface of the foreshore, so that gives you an idea of how much is gone. In 2018, just a few fragments of it just got washed away almost instantly. And then by 2020, we couldn't find any of it. So it really is urgent to try and get things recorded, because they're just going faster than ever. Now, it's just to give you a bit of location. Where the 2 ranging rods are a circle of posts. They look like twigs, but actually they're just the centers of larger posts that have lost their outer layers. And they came from that edge of the foreshore where the people are standing. That whole area has gone, and we never got a chance to record it properly. It's just washed away. And similarly, briefly appeared behind the gravel ridge 19 posts in a bit of an area that had been scoured out. And that was, the next couple of tides completely filled it in, and we've never seen it again. And that was in 2001. And with the aid of what was called earlier before junior auxiliaries, both named Alexander, well, Hilary and I planned it in. The 2 lads happily bailed out the lagoon, and a good time was had by all. But we hope to come back and do more, and we've never been able to. But Hilary Sims, who's responsible for a lot of finding material and features, found both these. There are things that are gone that we never managed to retrieve or fully record. This is actually at Barn Elms. And in the far top left of the photograph is where Mola did the excavations for the tideway and found that large Iron Age site. We don't know whether this was just a tree trunk or a bit of a dugout, but that too went before we could do anything about it. And you've got Nick Fuentes and Bill Smith cleaning it up for a photograph there in 1973. So I'm just reiterating how fast things are disappearing. We also have a rather nice alignment of posts which show up better in the right-hand photograph. They follow the contour of the foreshore and are not a fish trap. They're not going out into the river. And there's a branch of it there. Now, we knew about a few of the posts, about 5 of them, in the early 1990s, but erosion has meant that it's swept away the whole of this zone, and we now have about 40 posts. I do have a problem finishing planning them, because we're getting the low tides in spring, and the owners of the site are not friendly. And the moment they see a tape and a recording grid, I'm afraid they appear from nowhere and start hounding us. So we've done quite a lot of work on it, but it has been interesting to say the least. But that must be some sort of major structure, and I'm hoping to get that radiocarbon dated, because we really do need to know where it fits in. In the top left of the photo with the swans, where the sort of tall poplars are, again, that's right next to the molar site. And that patch of blue that goes into the left is the Beverley Brook, the end of the borough, but also features in things we've found, and we have found material on the other bank. Just a snapshot of the posts to show how they are eroding away quite differently. You first get a pointed hard bit, and then that goes and you get them flat. So they too are gradually disappearing. This is something that disappeared in a month. It's a sort of leaf-shaped, 2-meter long thing made of twigs. I don't know if it's a flattened fish trap, a small one, or something like a beer, because it's right in the middle of the area with quite a lot of finds of human remains. I was told about it after the low tides. Bob Wells kindly took a photograph of it the moment he got down there. And by the end of the month, there are hardly any bits left. Just a couple of twigs there. But there is a plan. I had a 20-minute window in a low tide, and it was not a nice experience. I got very wet. And one of the things we've been doing is monitoring damage, complaining like hell to people like Wandsworth Council, letting what is now Historic England know, and hoping that some things will change. Some haven't. This is one of Alexander's, our son, completely taken aback to find a large hole, which coincidentally is in an unrecorded bomb crater. A police boat had come in to pick up an unfortunate soul who'd thrown him or herself into the river and churned up a huge area. We got a lot of late Roman from around there, and he was completely taken aback, and we had to make sure he didn't decide to jump in as well. These holes are incredibly deep. They never get filled in. They fill up with silt, and then they become even more dangerous when they've got a layer of pebbles on top. The other thing that's disappeared since my time is in areas like Point Pleasant, and you can see the old industrial Wandsworth there. There were large areas of peat and wood remains, the same round the fish trap. There are a few grotty bits left by 2013, and you don't notice them like you did in the past when you stood on Putney Bridge and you could see the black patches. And that's the same area now for luxury houseboats and flats, and most of the industry's gone. I think the gasworks will as well. Things like this wooden structure, which we've spotted eroding out in 2014, had completely gone by this year, but we have made a record of it. Other things that were unforeseen, this beautiful chalk slipway or something, it's undated, and with its other side in Fulham, was found, and because they were going to do tideway works there unexpectedly to us, it got excavated by Mola. So that's the Mola excavations of the feature. Then Tideway come along, sink their shaft by the river wall, but stand their machine on top of it. And it's basically not there anymore. It's been completely mashed, and you find bits of it all over the foreshore as it's disintegrating. But that went in just a short time, and it was one of the few features you could see on the foreshore. And just beyond it, on the edge of the water, is a black dot. That is part of the old wooden Putney Bridge. So, and the footings for the toll house are at the moment under gunge, but alongside the river wall. So it was a nice little patch of historic remains. This is another one by a police boat. It made 7 holes, at least 1 metre deep, right through one of our other timber structures. And we have recorded these. 2 posts were taken out by the boat. Fortunately, we had recorded them the previous tide. And that used to be the lowest part of the foreshore, and you'll see how that's changed in a minute. But it's this constant people doing things that they shouldn't. This is it in 2020, and Liz is standing where the posts have gone. So they were a nice even row, and we'd found a new one just out here. We don't know what they are, what date they are, but the bark is still on the posts. And round here, the foreshore used to be much higher, and where she's standing was the lowest point, like a little valley. And the flint implements all turned up on the area between her and the edge of the image in huge numbers. You don't get them anymore. We're not getting them anymore. These wonderful bird barges. Mark Webber wrote an impact assessment and said, do not put them on the archaeological areas. So they did. And they dug 8 metre by 2 metre pits to put the anchors in, which they didn't fill in properly. And that's the state of the damage over the fish trap area. And it took quite a long time to actually get something done, and they were moved. The thing to note about them is they had lovely potted plants on them to attract the birds. We never found any evidence that a bird had ever sat there or stayed there, but we did find tramps and children, and they've moved them further down near the luxury flats, and the birds have now moved in. But it took a heck of a struggle.
Sorry, about 3 minutes.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm getting past the grotty bit. This is the damage caused by a tree being dragged from Barn Elms over to Putney, and then a barge and tracked vehicles removing it, and it was like the Somme. The holes there were deeper than my 2 metre ranging rod, and we couldn't touch the area for ages. But I think you can see the difference. And we know who did it, but unfortunately, Bob Wells's camera died at that moment when he took the photograph. So we haven't got pictorial evidence. There is massive erosion after these rainy winters, and that is one of our survey posts, and the old foreshore line is where it was meeting of the dark and the light. And that got whipped away pretty quickly. And this is right now. The first lot of floods in 2014 took back that gravel ridge. And then this winter, I think you can see the kind of steps that are being cut in it by the tides and by these characters. And that's the wave that's coming in that hits the top part of that ridge as tide was coming in. And it is rapid. And over here, we have a tree. It's an actual tree. We thought it was a post. But a month later, it's lost about 4 or 5 centimetres of foreshore, and we can see it's a tree growing on the foreshore. And this is the sort of thing I mentioned where the gravel had been washed away. These are the sort of finds over the last, say, 40 to 50 years, a whole selection of Mesolithic material. Thames picks or Mesolithic flint adzes from Wandsworth and Battersea. We haven't found any recently. Somebody else might have, but we've had the same people on the foreshore, so how can they have missed them? So I think that layer's gone. We have very little Neolithic, but loads of it on the dry land, and these are just a strikolite and a leaf-shaped arrowhead. So maybe the Neolithic will turn up in the foreshore somewhere else. Another find of the lifetime is this Camptonite polished stone axe, which was found in 1975 at Point Pleasant. So occasionally, like the sword and the axe, you get a stupendous piece of material. But the rest of it's ordinary and interesting and telling you what people are doing. This is a selection of our Bronze Age material. There's rather grotty flint work, and there's some pottery that looks Middle Bronze Age. And I think that axe probably goes with something else that was found by somebody else. And it's been chopped up, so it's one of those groups of finds. Sometimes you get a very nice piece of earliest Iron Age material. We have only found one parallel to this bowl. But again, that's an area that's going, and also we don't get the low enough tides to get to that spot anymore. Some other lovely things. There's this bone scoop, which is like lots of early Iron Age finds on dry land sites. And these things are usually identified as, post-Roman. But this looks so earliest Iron Age and is near that row of posts with the swans. So there's something going on there because there's other material from around there. And then other patterns are showing up. We get, or used to get, usually up to about 2005, with a few in 2012 to 14, decorated pieces of Samian that appear to have been broken to show an image. So we've got a lyre player, the next one's got a muscly guy that might be Hercules, there's a raven, there's a hunting scene, and another hunting scene. It's not quite like the material we've been getting on the dry land Roman Putney. It's a sort of concentration of a particular type.
And we're more or less on time.
Right, I'm more or less at the end. This is more of it. The restored cup actually came from the area with human remains, so that needs further consideration. But 60 odd in the same area of the foreshore is quite interesting. Also a broken pipe clay figurine from that same area. A lot of eating and drinking going on, but no signs of cooking. And occasionally a bit of documentary evidence. And this is a 1636 map. And if you look very carefully, you can actually see the gravel ridge. It doesn't on the original, it shows up as a feature with green behind it. The odd later thing has been retrieved, including a Bartman bottle with the cork, which is rather nice. This is a find reported to me by a small boy, and Angela Wardle kindly gave a wonderful description for me to pass back to him. And it's a poor man's recorder, really, a flipple flute. And just finally, we've lost two people who've contributed a lot to the Society's work on the foreshore. Bob Wells, earlier, who's specialised in finding things, and Hilary Sims, who died last year and found features as well as objects, but she's responsible for spotting a lot of the damage and a lot of the timbers. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Pam. Very important, very interesting work that Pam and her group did on the foreshore. They were sort of pioneering at it, and I think it perfectly well illustrates the amount of damage that can still occur and how dramatic and final, if you introduce new types of boat, some of that damage is. So thank you, Pam, for bringing that all to our attention.